In this video, I'm going to show you 3 ways that you can improve your compositions in your renders. So here is an image that I finished yesterday, and I'm going to use this as an example for these 3 techniques that I often use in my work. I think it's worth diving deeply into just this one image. That will show you how I use these techniques in combination with each other. It'll also show you just how deeply you can go and think about these compositional techniques when it comes to just applying it to one single image. So that'll be particularly useful for you if composition isn't something you think about that often. So the first thing I want to mention is leading lines and visual flow. So you might know what leading lines are. These are basically just natural lines that show up in the image, usually unintentionally, and you can kind of move them around more intentionally to guide people's attention to where you want. So these are usually things that are just naturally forming lines on different objects that you can use to point people in a certain direction to get them to look at one particular part of the picture. So for example, in here, if we take this bridge, for example, so the main section that you probably will look at first when you see this image is this big giant castle in the center. And there's a lot of things helping you snap your gaze towards that immediately as soon as you see the picture. So for example, if we zoom in here, there's this ginormous bridge running from left to right, kind of towards the middle. There's a lot of lines on these buildings that help kind of just guide your gaze towards this central area. There's also a lot of vertical lines leading upwards, and these are just naturally forming lines in the picture that I'm not adding one by one. They're just showing up on the models, but I'm moving stuff around in a way that it just happens to be that they're all kind of pointing you towards some main thing, right? And there's all these spires. These are almost like arrows pointing upwards. The rooftops are all sloped kind of in an arrow shape pointing upwards as well. And it's all going up and towards the middle, towards one, in this case, singular tiny point. So there's all these arches and little buttresses here and all these rooftops, and all this stuff is going upwards, central upwards towards sort of here, and also up even higher towards this one central tip-top final actually pixel point right here. So all of that is kind of guiding you towards that one section. There's also things like, we could say these tree branches are kind of just helping you. If your eye lands anywhere over here, it's going to kind of nudge you in this general direction, right, towards this general area, and that's going to help as well. Even the way these wagons are positioned, it's done in a way that the perspective is so that these lines are kind of just pushing you, in that same direction towards the middle, right? Even with something as simple as just a log in the corner, this isn't that strong of a leading line, but it's just something there that's helping you. If your eye lands there, it's going to push you gently in that general direction. You see that? So it's not like every single line has to guide you in a certain direction. There's certain lines in here that are not doing that at all. So things like this and, whatever. But in general, there's a lot of different lines that are helping you just converge on that singular point. What that's going to do is anyone who sees the picture, it just removes any friction from the viewer, removes any effort, so that when they look at it, it's easy. So that when they look at it, it's just they know where to look without having to think about it. It's automatic. When that happens, it's very pleasing to the viewer. It just feels nice not having to put effort in to try and understand what you're seeing. I think a lot of the times when you see like bad artwork, and there's exceptions to this, but just in general, when you see kind of bad or beginner artwork, a lot of the time it's because you're just overwhelmed and there's too much information and not enough guidance in the picture. So this is a great way that you can add guidance and help lead people towards what you want them to look at. So it's a very simple but very effective technique to do that. The next thing here is framing. You might have heard of this before, but hopefully this will really make it extra clear. Framing is basically just, again, around the main object, putting things on the outside of that act as a natural frame to help guide your attention towards that thing. So you can kind of count just these big blocks of shapes like around here as sort of blockers of where you don't really need to be looking as much. So they're just bold, dark shapes in this case, which are kind of blocking out parts of the picture which are not as important, leaving the center bright main area feeling more important. So all this kind of stuff here, even just this neutral sort of block of foreground, all that stuff there is kind of just blocking out the outside, leaving the thing in the middle feeling much more important, and just guiding your gaze there, snapping it there automatically so that when people see it, again, it doesn't require effort. It's just automatic where their vision goes. So here's something interesting. If I just use a curves adjustment layer to just increase the contrast by a ton and just make it insanely high contrast, look what happens. I just want you to pay attention to where it becomes lightest and where it becomes darkest. If I just really ramp this up, right? So if I just slam the contrast as hard as possible, look at what is black and look at what is white. Okay, so the black parts, of course, are all just these, what I outlined there, right? These big, bold outside edges, which are just kind of big, dark shapes around the outside. The white section is just only the stuff in the middle, which is the main area that I want you to look at. So of course, this is pushed way past the extreme of what you would ever do, but that's coming from what's actually in the picture. So even just this dark kind of neutral foreground, the dark, bold kind of shadowed wagons, the trees, which are not lit in a way that's distracting. They're just like bold, dark there, outlining the main thing. All that stuff is going to just push you towards the center, kind of like a natural vignette where it's just outlining the main thing. And it's, again, a very simple technique, but it works. Okay, the next thing is getting or establishing hierarchies within the picture. So there's many different ways you can do this, and you might be wondering exactly what that means and what the point of that would be. So I think the best way is just to give you some examples. So first of all, what this does is establishing a hierarchy in the picture really helps create a sense of order and balance, and also can help exaggerate the contrast of ideas or themes. So let me just show you exactly what I mean by that. If we take the main castle, for example, right? Just ignore everything else for now. We'll just look at this main kind of central area. Look at how this is organized. So I've placed the buildings in a way that, this one here is a bit shorter than this one here, and this one here is a bit shorter than this one here, and it all kind of leads up to the one main big building in the middle, which is, it makes that one feel like the biggest, tallest, most important one, and all the other ones are kind of subordinate to that one. So there's a hierarchy here of, if you were to like take all these buildings and just rank them for which ones seem more important and which ones seem less important, this one is going to be number one in the middle, right? This one seems like the most important, tallest, biggest tower. That's just because within the composition, within the two-dimensional view that we get in the end of the render, that one sticks up the highest, and it's, there's a few smaller ones beside that one. It's all organized in a way that there's a structure where there's the lowest level, then it goes up a bit and up a bit higher and up a bit higher and up a bit higher, all the way up to the very tallest point. So that's one way you can use it, and it's done in a way here where as it's converging towards the middle, it's getting taller and taller. Same thing over here. It's kind of leading up towards one singular point at the top, kind of like a triangular structure. And that's a very nice thing to do sometimes if you can do that. And what I mean by contrast of ideas or themes is that, if you can organize these things into a hierarchy where one thing rises above the other things, it makes that thing seem more important, and it makes the other things seem less important. And the further you can push those two things apart, if you want something to feel important, if you push those two things further apart, that important thing will seem much more important. It's kind of same thing with scale. If you want something to feel big, putting it next to something that's tiny makes it feel even bigger, versus if you put something big next to something even bigger, now it's going to feel small. So, I've got these birds in here. That's helping show the scale. The windows on here are completely tiny. That helps show the scale. So it's, big thing relative to small thing. Same thing even with like a wagon down here. That is just such a clear hierarchy of, at the bottom here, tiny little thing next to these giant buildings all the way leading up to this one mega huge giant spire in the middle. So all that is just, it's a hierarchy. It's the lowest level, and then it goes to the medium level and the highest level. As human beings, we like hierarchies because it's a nice way to organize it. It takes away the effort when you look at the picture, so that you can just automatically see exactly what's happening in the most clear way without having to stress and like worry and like try and figure out and understand what you're looking at. So it just removes the friction from the viewer and makes it just feel nice and pleasant to look at. So also, that's one example, is like the structure of the towers, but there's also hierarchy in terms of like, if you were to look at the entire picture and then rank all the objects in the picture, so like the wagons, the wheels, the stumps, the castle, the character here, like if you were to take all these different objects and just rank them in terms of like what is the most important thing and what are the least important things, at the bottom you'd probably put something like this random object here, probably not that important. This log, not that important. This wheel down here, not that important. And without overthinking it, it's just what feels more important and what feels less. So those things might be the lowest tier, where yes, in the grand scheme of the artwork, it is important to have these objects, but in terms of just what feels like the most important thing here, those will probably be the lowest thing here. And then if we go to the next level, what's a bit more important than that? Well, the second level might be like these wagons, this thing over here, maybe the character, maybe this wagon right here, maybe the trees. So that would probably be the next level. And then at the highest level, what's the most important, it's obviously the main giant castle in the middle here. So that's another way in which there's a hierarchy of, I've just placed these things in a way in which the least important things are lit, placed, and organized in a way in which they're meant to feel less important. And the most important thing is lit and placed in a way in which it's supposed to feel the most important. So the castle is in the center, the most brightly lit, the biggest thing in the distance, and everything is surrounding that. So that's why it feels like the most important thing. And these things, it's kind of an extreme example here, but they're literally in the shade, in the dark, off to the side of the image. When you have something off to the side, cut off like this, it obviously is going to feel a lot less important than something that's dead center in the middle. You can imagine if your friend asks you to take a picture of them, you're not going to point the camera like off to the side with them in the corner, right? You're going to put them just in the middle, because that's the most important thing in the picture is them. So when you do that, that thing's going to feel more important. When you shine more light on it, that thing's going to feel more important. When it is literally just bigger, that thing's going to feel more important. When it's small, dark, kind of covered up off to the side, that's going to feel less important. And also, if you have things, if you want the main thing to feel more important, if you have a lot of things that are kind of pushed more downwards into the shade off to the side, it really does make that important thing feel even more important if you kind of have these objects which are in there just for the point of being kind of subordinate to that main thing. And it's, again, just a hierarchy of, what is the most important stuff and what is the least important stuff. Basically, when people see your artwork, you don't want them to be confused, overwhelmed, and turned away by that because they don't understand what's happening at all. Obviously, there's exceptions to that. You can kind of lean into that if you want to create something that has a bit of like pain associated with looking at it. You can do that, but just as a general rule, I think that's mostly true, what I just said. If we look at the lighting here too, this is another compositional tool that you can use, is just using a strong sense of like strong directional lighting. So the lighting is a whole separate topic. I'm not going to go into that. I have another video on how to get good lighting in Blender, which goes a lot deeper into that if you want to watch that after. But just for this one, I'll explain what is going on here. So this is the setup I chose, is just bright light coming from one side. I've done it with spotlights, but you can do it with a sun lamp or whatever you want. So in this case, it's just a bunch of spotlights. There's really no world lighting. It's on very, very dim, but it's just a background. But it's just mainly spotlights coming from, the important thing here is that it's coming from one side and not the other side and not any other direction. So what happens when you do that is that when there's light coming very strongly from one side, you're going to create the most contrast you possibly can on that object, and it's going to reveal the form in the strongest way possible, bring out as many details as it possibly can. So you got to remember, half of lighting is not just creating light, but actually creating shadow. It's literally half the battle is where you place shadows. It's just as important as where you are placing light. And when you place the light right off to the side, like at a 90-degree angle to the camera, that's where you're going to get the most intense shadows you can get, other than if the light is like literally silhouetting everything. And what this is going to do is it's going to bring out the most detail that you can get. So all these like windows and stuff here on these models, all that is coming out because of the lighting is exaggerating all those features. You're revealing the form of what you're capturing as strongly as possible when you're lighting it like this, with a hard light coming from the side like this. So if you compare that to the lighting in the foreground is just very soft, very neutral, just blue kind of, neutral tones. No harsh light here at all. And that's, I think, kind of nice to contrast with the really hard sunlight hitting this super detailed castle. Contrasting that with kind of these big, bold shapes with just neutral kind of soft lighting in the foreground. So that's another interesting thing that's going on here too. So I think that's it for this one. If you like these kinds of videos, I recommend you go and check out the new Cyber Environments course. There's a link below. That's where you can get the most help that you can possibly get from me. You can ask me questions directly and, of course, get just access to the best, most in-depth knowledge that I have for creating environments like this in Blender. You also get to download a bunch of asset packs that I've made of a bunch of 3D models that I use in my own work, as well as join a community of a bunch of other environment artists who are probably quite similar to you because they all watch this channel. So yeah, check that out in the link below. Other than that, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.